and having a great time, and loves me. I want this to last all night, and it can't.
Welcome to the Pillars of Creation. I'm your host, Mitchel Dane, and today I'll be chatting with singer, songwriter, and overall creative force Davey Johnston. As a fixture of the Edmonton music scene, Davey came to be affectionately known as Fat Dave in his time in the self-proclaimed dad punk band, the Fuzz Kings, and now with his latest musical endeavor, the rock and roll trio, the Confusionaries. But when he is not strumming or humming a tune, he devotes himself to the pursuit of personal betterment, both in body and mind, which has resulted in over 150 pounds lost, 3 marathons run, as well as the overall adopting of a vegan lifestyle. He has documented this journey on his YouTube page, as well as his website, The Conscious Pilgrim, where as of 2022, he has been writing an ongoing blog and internet journal, and just as the Confusionaries album itself, his work covers everything from the headache to the heartache. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. It's been a bit of a setup process, just getting everything ready, but happy to finally get going on this thing.
Awesome.
Do you remember when you started writing music?
Vaguely. I would have been in grade 8.
And is that when you started playing guitar?
Yeah. So when I started playing guitar, sorry, I'm gonna just wipe my nose while we do this.
Yeah, it's all right.
You could cut that out and
Yeah,
post, right?
It'll all be edited out. It'll be very clean.
Perfect.
I'll zoom in on that moment. That'll be the hook for the audience.
Absolutely.
So you would have started playing guitar at that time. Obviously, I would assume that you were interested in music before then.
Yes.
Do you recall a artist or a band or a lyricist of some kind that stood out to you as being of importance to you as a songwriter today, or at least an influence?
It's a good question. I mean, I sort of grew up on the classics. My parents were teenagers in the 60s. So my dad was a big Rolling Stones guy, but I was also raised in the church, right? There's a certain amount of rock and roll that sort of got filtered out by that sort of religious guilt. And as much as my dad was kind of a Rolling Stones guy, he wasn't when I was a kid, because songs like "Sympathy for the Devil" didn't really suit the vibe of the house at the time, right? So the music that we had in our the sort of cassette collection that we had in our Toyota Corolla when I was a kid was decidedly more friendly. So there was like Petula Clark. We had a Beach Boys cassette. The Best of Buddy Holly was in there.
Sure, I was going to ask if he was an influence on you starting out.
Yeah, definitely. Billy Joel's Glass Houses, which is still one of his better albums as far as I'm concerned. There was like a compilation cassette of a bunch of stuff, and You Really Got Me by the Kinks was on there. I recall that one specifically because that sort of dum-dum rhythm, that and the melody that went along with it was not very far deviated from the chord progression, right? And that sort of like that distorted guitar, like it was a highlight as that tape went around and around and around. I recall being really into that particular song, and later, I never really got to be a huge Kinks fan, but there was a few songs that they had, and that was the first one that I ever heard that was just awesome to me.
I guess the reason I ask about like first influences, I notice a lot of your songs tell a story, and so I'm curious if there was any particular artist that had a similar style of storytelling. Like the music I grew up listening to, there was a lot of really abstract lyrics that were, I don't know if I would go as far as to say they meant nothing, but there was, or it was a little bit more on the nose. It was less about
Yeah.
subtext within the lyrics. It was more just about, if they were feeling sad, they would say, I feel sad, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when I listen to your lyrics, the storyteller in you comes out. And, I was just curious if there was an artist like, say, like a Johnny Cash or something like that, that would have been an influence on you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm, I think Johnny Cash is kind of an influence on everybody.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Um, at this point, like that body of work is incredible. Um, Tom Petty as well.
Mm.
But to be honest, a lot of that stuff kind of came a little bit later. Um,
Into your songwriting?
yeah, like I
Yeah.
was a guitar player first,
Mm.
and started. I started writing lyrics. I think mostly just to give the songs I was working on some structure.
Right. Right.
And the first couple of bands that I played in, like, had designated singers, and I wasn't the designated singer.
Sure.
Um, and so what kind of ended up happening is that I didn't really love the way the songs were being interpreted. So I would try and like play the song and sing it at the same time so that this person, whoever was singing could kind of get a grip on what I was trying to convey. And, before long, I just ended up singing my own songs because
Yeah.
I could.
Right.
Um, I think like my chops as a singer have been a lot slower. I think proud of the way I sing now, but there's all kinds of singing that I've done
Right.
in my formative years that is not great,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't really wish to have anybody hear that stuff. Like if somebody
Mm.
was going to do a deep
Right.
dive the way you would with like the Beatles, you'd find them actually like singing quite well in their teen years, and
Oh, yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I didn't. I was kind of like I got into punk rock and heavy metal and stuff like that, and I want to sing like like some sort of ogre from the other side, and like didn't really come into a singing voice until much later.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was more like a means to an end to begin with, I would think, where it's
Yeah,
like they're not singing it right, and so I guess I got to do it myself.
yeah, yeah, and that's not to say they weren't good singers because they were, and if you guys are watching, but but yeah, when you have a vision and not that you can't compromise, and not that I'm not willing to try and work with people, but you know, I at that time I was maybe a little more stubborn, definitely a little more stubborn, and and I wanted it done a certain way, and I was a teenager. I was probably a pretty big dink about it while I was at it, but
And that would have been starting out, you said, in the punk scene, more or
yeah.
less.
So
Yeah.
so we're talking like mid '90s.
Right.
I got my first guitar, which is a funny story too. Um, my dad took me. My dad's kind of a little more. He leans a little more to the right than I do. Let's say, right? Um, and we went shopping for a shotgun.
Oh.
Yeah, and because he wanted to spend more time with me.
Right.
We're gonna go get a shotgun, and we're gonna blow some holes in some paper targets, and maybe go hunting one day and drag home a deer. And years later, I'm like a vegan songwriter, but 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 yeah. So we went to a few places and didn't really see anything that really resonated with him. And then we stopped into Avenue Guitars, which was a pretty iconic guitar shop here in Edmonton at that time. And there was a used Telecaster on the wall, and that that was that. Like,
Yeah. And that became your weapon of choice.
yeah, I still have it. It's beat to beat to crap at this point.
what could have happened if your dad found the right gun?
Yeah, yeah,
Your whole path would have been different. Yeah.
it could have been.
So with your songwriting as it sits now, you talk about control. That brings up a good question, because I'm curious, when I with anyone who's in a collaborative art, like certainly within a band, I wonder about how much collaboration your other bandmates have when it comes to your songwriting or your lyrics.
Well, yeah. I mean, I grew up a bit as we went along. It's like I've been in a bunch of bands at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, some people get into a band and they just stay in that band forever, and that's amazing to me. Um, and they just grow and evolve together. I It's more of like a series of failed relationships
Hmm. Yeah.
where you make music with some people and you kind of get on the same page for the most part, and you learn some stuff from each other, and then it comes to a stop, and you go start another band or join another band, and
Mm.
taking with you what you learned from working with these other people. And years later, you've worked with dozens of people and played in dozens of different rooms and had a few different recording experiences and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, you're kind of like semi-professional.
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
and with that, you sort of build a reputation over time. I've uh, I've built a reputation over time, and I've um, kind of honed my craft as a songwriter and as a guitar player. And at this point, if I like when I started the Confusion Airs, which is pushing 8 years ago now,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Wow.
I was actually able to, that's the longest I've ever been in any one band.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the longest I've been in any like three bands. but
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but by the time I was able to do that, I could kind of cherry pick really good players, just because of my reputation within the community here. So I have a fantastic bass player and a fantastic drummer who are just like right on board right away. Just like, okay, let's go.
Makes a difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's so much timing to that stuff too, like finding these collaborative partners. Um, I think it's similar to dating in a lot of ways, in that like you're just sort of like, if the stars align and people have
Mm-hmm.
time to dedicate to something, then
Mm-hmm.
they'll come along and do it. For
Yeah.
uh,
Well, it's the willingness to compromise.
yeah,
Um, especially in art, that's a tricky concept because,
yeah,
like we were saying before, vision can be so strong that sometimes you're just and I've been guilty myself, where you're just like, no, it must be this way. This is the only way it can be. And and any just like in any interpersonal relationship, whether it be romantic or professional or whatnot, you have to be willing to compromise if you have any hope of staying together.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, timing is a big factor. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to date somebody who's already in a serious relationship, right? Like they have to be available at that same time too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
else it's not meant to be. Like um, so a dozen other bass players and a dozen other drummers wouldn't have been able to commit, you know. But these
Oh,
guys
sure.
were
Yeah.
like it all happened at the right time. So I brought forth some songs that I'd sort of been working on, and they picked them up real fast because they're excellent players. And I at this point in my life, I don't have that stranglehold on the song. Like I got you know I don't get a lot of input for lyrics. I kind of do that part myself, chord progressions and stuff like that. But my role as a guitar player and singer is to play the guitar and sing.
Sure. Right.
For a drummer that I'm playing with, like I'm not going to tell him how to play the drums. because at this point,
Right.
like a drummer that I'm playing with, it is a proficient musician in his own right, has been doing so for 25, 30 years, and
Hmm.
isn't going to take pointers from me anyway. I trust those guys to do what they're doing. And as a result of not micromanaging that arrangement, they are more emotionally invested in the final product as well.
Yes. Oh yeah, you want them to feel like their role is as integral to the song as yours is, to the creation of the album or the song itself.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've been in bands of both on both sides where you're dictating everything, and where it's more of a collaborative effort, and it's far more enjoyable. I think for everyone involved, when everyone feels invested in the final product, because they're a piece of them is in there.
yeah. And I mean, some songs come together where it's, here's a three chord song. It's 2.5 minutes long, and it has a guitar solo after the second verse. And, like
Right.
we're not really like
Hmm.
reinventing the wheel in a lot of in a lot of ways. But
Right.
then, there's another song we were working on just the other night where there's this sort of like this, bridge breakdown sort of, where the song kind of drops in intensity and and we felt our way through the end of the song, and then our drummer Adam was like, I need to come up with something cooler to do in that part. And Jason was
Mm.
like, our bass player Jason was like, yeah, me too. And then I was like, well, so do I. So like
Let's rewrite
it's
this. Yeah.
it's not done, right? Like
Yeah.
where
Hmm.
and we can agree on that, and but we're all pulling in the same direction. The goal is the same,
Right.
even though
Hmm.
we're handling different parts of it. So
With the confusion errors, you clearly have a um, rockabilly aesthetic, and but maybe not a traditional rockabilly sound.
yeah.
I know you have spoken in the past about how you wouldn't even consider yourselves to be a rockabilly band, um, which I find interesting, because maybe I just don't know enough about rockabilly. But is that a content thing, or is that a strictly music?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Um,
Mm.
I don't know. To a purist, rockabilly as a genre of music existed for roughly between 6 and 9 months in 1956, right? Like
Oh, I see.
the
Right.
sound sort of put forth by Elvis Presley and Bill Black and Scotty Moore at Sun Studios when they recorded those first few songs, and the sound of that studio is essentially what rockabilly in its pure form is.
I see. So is it kind of like a champagne versus sparkling wine sort of situation, where it's like, if you don't go to the motherland, if the sun is not beating down on you from in Nashville, if it's not happening, then you cannot call yourself rockabilly. You are just sparkling wine. You are just the sparkling wine of rockabilly, and don't even mention champagne. Is that the kind of idea?
Well, at this point, no. But if we were talking to a musical historian, then they would say yes. Um,
Sure.
but since that sound inspired so much that came after it,
Mm.
it's sort of like that term means something different now. Like it's more of a it's more of an indicator of influence now
Right.
than it would have been kind of back then. Basically, some journalist was trying to come up with a term to describe this sort of this melding of R&B and country music that was happening at the time,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
these young guys were doing, and that kids were getting all excited about. And
Right.
I mean, largely like even the term rock and roll came later on, and
Mm-hmm.
then um, was then that label was placed on music that had already been made, and that music that was
Oh, I
already
see.
made was probably R&B, um,
Right.
largely, right? So to say rockabilly now is fine. I mean, we are a three-piece band. It's guitar, upright bass, and drums, and we have country flavored songs that are more rock and roll than country for sure. And really, like as far as like if you were gonna write down um, the Wikipedia's definition of rockabilly,
Mm-hmm.
um, we we check off all those boxes.
Right. Yeah. I know for a lot of people, it's simply just having an upright bass in your band.
Yeah,
It's like as simple as that. Even though I know it isn't, but it's one of those indicators. It's so iconic, that image. And then when you have someone playing it, as tremendously like Jason, geez, that sound, that upright bass sound, is so indicative of rockabilly.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to, kind of make more, not a statement so much as there, when anytime I'm listening to a new songwriter, or I'm reading a new book, or anything like that, I do love it when a detail about the author's life comes out that's not necessarily the point of the song. It's just a little detail, a little sprinkling of their life in the song. And it also just goes to show the creativity of the songwriter. And I wanted to just quickly touch on this because I just it's the first song off of "It's Time to Make a Little Mess," circa 2018, and it's just such a great lyric that says it tells me a little something about you, that's not necessarily has anything to do with the song.
All right.
I can tell your car's all loaded up by the way it sits on the grass. Shocks are all worn out and they tend to sag under the weight of a full tank of gas.
Now that tells me that you know cars in a way I would never have thought to even go near. That would never have occurred to me as a detail to put in a song, but it says so much about your knowledge. But it also does paint the picture. It completely tells the story of what's happening in that moment.
Yes.
And obviously, cars, are play a role. Like they're one of the characters in the story of Confusion Airs because they come up.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a genre thing as well, but it definitely it plays because that's the first line in the song, and I remember hearing it and going, "Oh, he's a good writer," because that scene is set immediately.
Yeah.
and and do you find that your knowledge of cars, I know sounds silly, but is that something that helps you when you're writing music in this rockabilly, or I guess I should say, just rock and roll? Do you find that you can draw on this wealth of knowledge that you have because you are mechanically inclined?
you you sort of have to write about what you know, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And at this, ripe old age, it's ripe old age.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know a little bit.
Yeah.
You've seen some stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, I have owned crappy old cars. I currently own a crappy old car,
Mm-hmm.
and I I don't know that specific line. Like, I couldn't tell you exactly where it came from, but I do remember. I used to work in a hot rod shop for a brief period of time, and when I we would go to show up at these show and shines and stuff like that, and we all had matching jackets. So you go like in the morning, like you get up early, you go wash your car, you make sure it's like worth looking at before you take it out to this thing and park it next to a bunch of other old cars and stuff like that. And the owner of the shop, Lee, he said we'd lowered my car in front, but not so much in the back. And he said you should put a bunch of stuff in the trunk so that the back end comes down, and make sure your tank is full. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, like that's such a great detail because I love little things like that that you would never think of, but they tell the story. It's like there's a great quote out there. It says, "Don't write about the atrocities of war. Write about the burnt socks on the side of the road." It's like you write about the little things, and they tell the bigger picture. And that's one of those things, right? It sets the scene of a woman who wants to leave,
Yeah.
while it's simultaneously telling me that you know cars. You know, it's
Yeah.
simple. I'm sure I didn't expect me to talk about that, but I love that
No,
line. And it's
no.
the first line in your debut album. And so it stands out to me, but it was the first time that I recognized your writing chops.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I did want to touch on another topic that I think is very interesting because now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have 3 studio albums. Is that
Yeah, three
correct?
full-length ones.
Full length
There's a
studio
few other
albums.
songs.
Yeah, and then a couple B sides and some singles that have come out. And so there's a progression here that tells a story, tells something about you, and it's not so much that you are hiding, behind stories or something like that. Your songs are as autobiographical as anyone else's, but I noticed there's a progression here, which is going to lead to our next topic. But so your first album, it's time to make a little mess with the Confusion Errors. That album ends with 1,000 shots of whiskey.
You can drink 1,000 shots of whiskey between the day you're born and the day you die. You can spread them out over 10 or 20 years. Me, I'm gonna drink them all tonight.
Great line, gets the party started, and a great song too. And then you have your second album, From the Headache to the Heartache. There's a song called Sour Mash.
Between the love and the leaving, the drinking and the drum, small town country music band and a big city hardcore punk, the highway and the sound check, the gigs and the forgotten names, from the headache to the heartache, man, you make them all feel the same. So here's to you, sour mash.
And then finally, there is a song called Slur Your Words off of your most recent release, Westernization.
Nice.
And the last verse, and I think it'll tell the story if it hasn't already.
Hey, now for the sad part. Wipe the tear from your eye. The life of the party is now saying goodbye. But that torch will be passed and you'll see that spirit again. I know 'cause it used to be me. I used to be him. Slay your words.
So clearly, there's a journey towards sobriety
Yeah.
in those lyrics.
That seems that
Um,
way.
And I love that because, Westernization as an album, you talk about how that album is about change. And that's a really great lyric for representing that change, that it's, kind of passing the torch, you're moving on. That's for someone else to do. It's not really passing judgment in and of itself, but it is saying it's time to move on.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your journey towards sobriety?
Well, I can tell you that when I wrote all three of those songs, um, and they were not written at in the at the same time or anything, that I was not sober, but I was kind of done with pretending to be a party guy. I don't know that I ever really was comfortable being a party guy. So um, typically, I think what a lot of people do, um, and there's no judgment because everybody's kind of in their own place. Um, when you feel that kind of social anxiety, you do something about it. You
Mm.
take the edge off, right? And to take the edge off is fine and good. That's what you want to do. Um, but I sort of came to a realization that I like if I have been taking the edge off, that means that I have an edge,
Mm. Right.
and I maybe I don't want to take the edge off.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe that edge is important.
Well, that's why I find that intermediary lyric, at least between the three that I chose, from the headache to the heartache, for Sour Mash, because I feel like there's, and this happens in a lot of your lyrics, where it feels like there's a covert warning that maybe there's a statement being made, but there's a secondary statement that's also being made. And so the song being an ode to sour mash whiskey, from the lovin' to the leavin', the highs, the lows, um, you make them all feel the same. That's the numbing effect, right? I mean, and that's the kind of,
100%.
and that is the removing yourself from the moment, which can be, looking back on it, you can definitely see how, you know, what have you missed in that same breath, as much as you may have enjoyed it at the time.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, like, I don't know, if you're drinking, and it's fine if
Mm-hmm.
everybody's on their own path. Again, no judgment, but like if you are into that, then the sweet spot is that like that 2 beer buzz, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which you know for those more seasoned beer drinkers takes like 3 or 4, right?
Right. Yep.
But there's such a thin line of just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I've turned myself into Mr. Personality. People are laughing at all my jokes, and you know, having a great time, and everybody loves me.
Mm-hmm.
I want this to last all night, and it can't. So you like, and yeah, like I'm having a great time. Why would
Mm-hmm.
I stop, right? And now you until you're over that line,
Yeah.
and it, and now you're no longer charming. You're more of an asshole, right? We've
Mm.
all been there.
Yeah.
Even some of us it happens way faster than others. Generally, I was pretty happy drunk, you
Mm-hmm.
know, um, and I was uh, good with being play. But like I've always kind of been a show up a little bit late, leave a little bit early kind of guy.
Mm.
I think it's worked in my favor.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Where
definitely.
like I'm
Yeah.
not there for the messy part of the party,
Yeah.
but
It's like
like
you need to know when to cash out your chips, kind of idea.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I think I was just like accidentally good at that.
Mm.
Um, but I don't know if I was ever like physically dependent. Like I never got
Mm.
shakes or anything like that.
Right.
But I was definitely socially dependent on alcohol. And you like you said something a minute ago that was it's a thing that I think about quite a bit, and that is to be in the moment
Yeah.
and like to be 100% present, to be 100% sort of focused on what you're doing at any given time is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a very great thing. I mean, there's a reason why they call being drunk impaired.
Right.
It's because you are not capable of doing a number of things that everybody should be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So when I am even slightly impaired, I'm not focused
Right.
because I've taken the edge off. And so it started with not drinking before I play because I want
Mm-hmm.
to be present. I want to give good performance. And then eventually it was like, well, I play lots of shows and I haven't been drinking that much. So when I do, it hits me a little bit harder because my
Yeah.
tolerance has gone down.
Mm.
So I had a really good conversation with my girlfriend Luann. We've been together for a long time, and she told me that she worries when
Mm.
I am out playing because then, show is great. Everybody's having a good time, you know, sang like a bird, played like a rock star,
Mm-hmm.
and sold lots of merch, and, show was great. And now it's time to celebrate. And she's like, that's the part where I worry because you're going to be able to make really poor decisions a lot more quickly if you got pulled over, and, it would be really bad. Like, this would be really awful.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then kind of out of the blue, I went to a music conference in Calgary. On the last night, it was like, there's a bunch of bands playing everywhere, and I got shit faced, and I didn't. It wasn't a good time, and I like I was super super hungover, and driving back from Calgary, it's a 3 hour drive, and
Mm.
we pulled over on the side of Highway 2 multiple times so I could throw up in the ditch.
Mm.
And at that point, I was like, no, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I was so sad and so embarrassed. The depressive component of coming down from an alcohol high is like it puts you in a real sad place, and this is not where I want to be. So
Mm-hmm. Do you
so
find that now that you've reached that conclusion, do you find that being in a rock band that plays in bars and just the nature of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, alcohol, booze, and all that stuff, do you find that it makes it difficult to sing about like sing those songs that are about the thousand shots of whiskey? Do you find it difficult to sing songs about the sober side of life? Does that change, anything?
um not really. I mean, the first couple of shows after I decided that I wasn't going to drink anymore
Mm-hmm.
were maybe a little bit. It was a little bit challenging,
Mm-hmm.
just because everybody around you is like, you worked real hard tonight, and everybody around you is having a nice beer, and it's like, oh, let me get you buy you a shot and all this stuff. But that went away after a couple of shows
Mm-hmm.
because partly because I didn't have to worry about whether or not I was going to have a drink anymore. Like, that question
Right.
was already answered.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, and Lou would ask me sometimes, like, oh, what are you going to do if somebody offers you a drink? I'm like, I haven't even considered the possibility that that would happen because I am not interested in doing that now.
Right.
So,
Makes it a lot simpler.
whereas before it was like, well, how many drinks am I going to have?
Yeah.
What kind of beer do they have on tap? What am I going to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
what happens if somebody buys a bunch of Jaeger bombs? Like, and like, those questions are all answered. Like, they were all answered 2 years ago now.
Right.
I don't have to worry about those things
Mm-hmm.
because it's just like, well, I'll just pass mine to the person next to me. They'll probably appreciate it, or none for me, thanks. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty easy to say no. I don't want to have a
Yeah.
drink in 2024. You
Yeah. I
know,
think people are more respectful now, and it's also about learning how to say no.
yeah, yeah,
Um, especially when it's someone is showing appreciation. I always had that problem too. If someone was like, "Oh, that was such a great gig. Here's a shot," and it was always like hard for me to say thank you, but no.
yeah,
And so it's like once you do come to that conclusion, it's a lot simpler. It's probably simpler for everyone involved because you just don't have to worry that it's not this drink or that drink. It's just no drinks.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Which this definitely brings me to kind of the next subject, which is your health journey is ties into it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
But obviously you've come a long way with your health. I touched briefly in the bio that you've lost over however many years, 8 or 9, probably more than that, 9 or 10 years. You had moved from being quite heavy and losing around just over 150 pounds, to
yeah,
being you know a marathon runner, a vegan. that has to change things too when anytime you're writing, because we are so dictated by our what we consume and what we don't consume.
Yeah,
And so I would have to think that, just such a massive change in your life would affect your writing.
definitely. And I mean, you know, I didn't really like when we did Westernization, like we recorded it during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
which was a time of massive change for everyone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
nobody wasn't affected by that, right? And I was going through a bunch of like personal growth stuff too, like positive changes. And I was sort of like I was writing songs and kind of waving goodbye to a few things and embracing some other new things. And so, thinking about that album, like, yeah, that album is about change. Like
Mm-hmm.
every song on that album refers to some some measure of change, whether it's the passing of the torch, um, of being the party animal, like the
Mm-hmm.
song that you referenced, or there's another song that called "It's Not My Business Either Way,"
Mm-hmm.
which um, has a few paraphrased quotes from a couple of different authors in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just sort of like whatever's whatever's going on that I can't control doesn't really concern me.
Mm.
Um,
The Stoic
and
philosophy.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's there's a part of that is actually taken from a passage in the Quran. I don't know which
Oh.
one
Mm.
or how to find it,
Mm-hmm.
um, but the original passage, and of course I'll paraphrase because it's English and I don't have it in front of me.
Sure, fair enough.
Um,
I can't
is
speak Arabic anyway, so
Yeah, exactly. Well, then we're in the
yeah,
same boat.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly. So
it's
paraphrase away. Yeah, yeah.
the truth will be what convinces is
Mm.
essentially the line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, people will take that quite frequently to be like, okay, well, you'll know the truth when you see it.
Right.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what God will reveal the truth to you. And but that's not really what it's saying to me anyway.
Mm.
The truth will be what convinces really speaks more to the idea of whatever you believe to be true will be what you believe to be true,
Mm.
even if it's false, right? So,
Well, that's very true today for sure.
and
Mm-hmm.
we'll pick on the flat earthers for a second here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever, if you think the world's flat, good for you. I don't actually care. It's not my business either way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Doesn't change your life.
but yeah, but if you are convinced that the world is flat, then that is your belief. Like you will believe that that is true,
Mm.
right? I am not convinced of that, and so I believe that that is not true. I believe that the world is round, and
Mm-hmm.
therein lies the difference. I like for people that are adamant that the world is being run a certain way, and that there's all kinds of different theories about the way things are going, and the fact of the matter is, like, I have no control over those things regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the world really is flat, does it change the fact that tomorrow morning my alarm is going to go off at 5 o'clock?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get up, I'm going to make oatmeal, I'm going to go to the gym for like
Mm-hmm.
an hour and a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come home and get ready for work and go to work. Is any of that going to change based on this, like, you know earth-shattering information that I've just been presented with? No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So why do I need to, lose my shit over it?
Right.
I don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2 minute, you know, bouncy rock and roll song that
Mm-hmm.
has like a catchy sing along part. Not my business either way, and
Yeah.
but people gloss right over that, like
Mm-hmm.
what I'm actually saying, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's cool that they miss it, and they're just like they're still
Mm-hmm.
receiving that message.
Well, that's something that occurred to me today as I was kind of going through some of my notes and just reading through some of the lyrics as, just trying to prepare myself for today. And I was just thinking about how often it comes about where we listen to songs, we sing songs, we know every line in the song, but we don't know what it means because we haven't
Oh
thought
yeah.
about it. I know there's tons of songs that I've heard on the radio, and I know the chorus, and I sing the chorus or whatever. Maybe it's a really catchy song, and then someone says, "Do you know what that song's about?" And you're like, "No, I don't." And it's something horrific or something like that, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't, I know." And I just think like music, when it comes to lyrics, absolutely they're on the back burner of most people's minds when it comes to like consuming it or listening to the, like, enjoying the art, if you want to take it that, put it that way.
Yeah.
And I just think like, what other medium where people can know every line but not know what it's about? And it's like, and it's not just an interpretation thing. It's strictly not caring to know. The
Yeah.
only thing that came to mind was like, like Shakespeare. Like everyone knows the to be or not to be soliloquy, and it's, but how many people knew what Hamlet was actually saying? But we all know most of the lines of that speech,
Yeah.
and I just think like, man, with music, everyone listens to a song and determines from that listening whether they want to explore deeper, if they want to go deeper into that narrative, I guess you want to say, or whatever the actual lyrical content is. It's like, well, it's not catchy enough, so I don't care.
Yeah.
And it's like the battle I think songwriters have in terms of getting a message or a point across, if they want to, is that they have to win a battle first, which is the battle of the melody, the battle of the song, the battle of the riff. And so it's interesting. And some people, maybe they're right to do so, or maybe they're right not to care. Songwriters, at least, where they just go, well, I don't care about the lyrics because nobody cares about the lyrics. Which is, a generalization, but I care about lyrics. I'm always opening up the sleeve and taking a look at the when up, if I've bought the physical copy, or if I go online and I'll look at it,
Yeah.
because to me it's just like, well, I immediately want to know more about the song, you know, maybe right from the very beginning, if I'm invested in the artist.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just, if I'm gonna put, you know, put pen to paper, either literally or metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm gonna put words to a song, I don't want them to be stupid.
Mm.
Like, no, and don't get me wrong. Like, a song about a dumb thing that is well written is, in my books, a well written song, right?
Totally.
Um,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be some lofty concept. Yeah, but it is interesting, the difference between throwaway lyrics
yeah,
and, and the lyrics about something dumb that's, you know written with care.
yeah. Like, not every song can be the immigrant song, right? Not every song can be Stairway to Heaven or these songs, right? There's like some songs are just fun and lighthearted and dumb, and 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 that's totally fine, and you can come by that honestly.
Hmm.
But I just think that if you're going to, for me anyway, if I'm gonna like write lyrics to a song, they should at least be clever. They should at least be
Mm.
saying something. I watch TV with the subtitles on all the time.
Hmm.
And sometimes like they'll play some song and the the subtitles for the lyrics of the song will come.
Mm.
And so I'm reading the lyrics of this song that I've never heard, and it just sort of sets a mood for this scene in this show. And I'm like,
Hmm.
this is some of the worst shit I've ever read
Yeah.
in my life. Like,
Right.
what is this person even on about? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I'm just like, this
Yeah.
song is so cool in so many ways,
Hmm.
and these lyrics are actually kind of ruining it for me. Like,
Oh, sure. I've had there's been plenty of songs where I've looked into the lyrics, and I've really liked the song before, and then I'm like, oh, those lyrics are so dumb, or or that what like, oh, I didn't like that they said that, or I disagreed with this or that or whatever. And it's
Yeah.
just it's like, but that
Sort of.
barrier, that veil, you like pull back the veil and you say, oh my goodness, shut that again, like, because that is, those lyrics are like a means to an end. They're there to fill the void where scat skibbity bibbity boo would have taken its place. So you
Yeah.
throw a couple lines in there and you just go and hope for the best. Most people aren't going to care or notice anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, I don't know, I've said to a few people over the years, just like, if I run out of things to say, like, if I actually, was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm good, I said
Mm.
it, like, no point repeating myself, I would probably just start playing instrumental music.
Yeah.
Like, I would still want to have fun, I would still want to make noise and fill dance floors and, you know, have a good time. But like, if I'm not going to say anything, like, then you don't have to, because there's a bunch of like totally ripping songs that don't have any lyrics.
Oh,
And
sure. Yeah.
maybe I would shoot for that, like,
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about most people, like the perception of what you're singing, they may not even they may not even know what you're saying, let alone misinterpreting it.
yeah,
I think of like, I can't think of the song right now, but it's that one where it was like New York City beat a tomato, and everyone was hearing that wrong, and it was like New York City limousine tomato or something like that.
Concrete jungle, wet dream tomato. About New York.
yeah.
Because they knew the
They knew what it
yeah,
sounded like, but not what it actually was.
yeah, they had this, and it was one of those things. And then once I heard that, I cannot unhear it, because that's exactly what it sounds like, to the point where now that's what I will sing if I hear the song. I can't think of it right now, but that always makes me just howl with laughter, because it's
Yeah,
and you think, until that came out, how many people thought the same thing, but unironically, like they just thought that was what the singer was singing. Yeah. So but to get back to your health journey, so you've come this long way. You've lost the weight, you've kept it off. During the pandemic, I know you and your partner, became vegans in that time,
yeah,
and you had also trained for a marathon, and so in that time you had started you released a series of documentary episodes, say documenting the training for the marathon or the triathlon. Sorry.
yeah. For the triathlon, I did.
Yeah, under the Conscious Pilgrim handle.
Yeah,
And you also have a blog or an internet
yes,
journal that you write. And
yeah,
so it's been a few years since you've released any videos, but you do regularly contribute to this vlog. Um, is there any plan to release any more video content? And I just wonder what inspired you to do that. What was the thing that made you want to jump into documenting some of this health journey that you've been on?
Well, I mean, the blog and the videos kind of came about at the same time. Um, it was about training for the triathlon, which we did. I did it on my 40th birthday, and it wasn't an actual competition, right? Like I would have lost. Like, I would have been last. Um, Not to downplay it, it was still very physically demanding, and we still did it. I'm still proud that I did it. I'm not trying to downplay it, because it was fucking hard. And it was just sort of like, hey, I want to do this thing, and I'm going to document it, because partly because it was COVID. Like, there was
Mm,
really, you know,
nothing
like,
else to do.
I had time
Yeah.
to dedicate to these
Mm-hmm.
things. And if there's anything preventing me from doing more video content, it is, um, it's time
Right.
at this point.
That makes sense. Yeah, because you wouldn't
Um,
have been playing a lot of shows at that time for sure.
yeah, we were making the Westernization album uh, around that time. Um, but
Mm,
we were getting together once a week, and I had
yeah.
several other days to fill my time, or at least in the evenings, and
Mm-hmm.
So did that, and it was cool and it was fun, and I'm glad I did it to completion. But yeah, it just became a matter of time. The writing though, the writing is something that I could keep up with,
Yeah.
because sometimes, I mean, as a writer, and I mean, this, this is probably relatable. Sometimes you just sit down and get your fingers moving,
Mm-hmm.
and it just goes right, and it's amazing, and it's cool because it's not songwriting. It's different.
Right.
It's more of it's more journaling,
Right.
and it doesn't have to rhyme, and it doesn't have to fit a particular cadence or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little more unbridled, but it's still like a poster, still like between 2 and 5 minute reads, generally speaking. But and I can it's a thing that I can keep up and do once a week. Now I actually write them in advance too.
Right.
Um,
So you schedule the release.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
schedule the release, and
Mm-hmm.
because you never know what's gonna, like, are you gonna be able to actually like sit down and write a blog post like between Christmas and New Year's when you got
Right.
family all, like, not really. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I try to stay a few weeks ahead of myself,
Yeah.
um, and just so that I can be consistent. Um, but yeah, uh, there are weeks when I write a blog post every day, and then there are months where it's just like, man, I better write a blog post or else I'm
Right.
gonna, like,
Yeah.
there's gonna be a lapse here, like, which I don't know if anybody would notice, to be honest, but
Right. Yeah. That's the thing about
I would know.
um
So
yeah, yeah. Especially with an internet journal because you're writing with a very diverse set of topics, thoughts, feelings that you're running through and it's from a consistent audience perspective, I can see that being like more or less like based on the topic, you might get a lot of people who are interested in that one topic or whatnot. And so day to day, blog to blog, whatever it might be, entry to entry. I'm sure you see the numbers go up and down for your readership.
yeah, yeah,
But
I've got. It occurred to me that I have subscribers.
oh, right,
Not long ago, there's like 71 people followed.
yeah,
I don't know if I know any of them. Like,
right.
it's
That's great.
pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you've been doing it for a long time, so you've cultivated, I'm sure, you've built that brick by brick with every post, and I think the act of writing, the simple sitting down and facing that blank page, because that's like a battle we all have to face.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Blank page can be anything.
that's right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
so good luck deciding. Like,
It can be a silent room when you're picking up your guitar. It can be literally a blank page that you're putting words onto. But I'm sure that just it's like keeping your chops up when you're writing every day or every other week or every week, whatever it might be. Keeping consistent in that, I'm sure not only is that I'm a good outlet as an internet or as a journal would be, but even just your chops as a writer, I'm sure as just keeping up with it, because sometimes you're talking about some pretty in-depth, complex concepts. So being able to do that succinctly, like you said, a 2 to 5 minute read, it's like short stories almost.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know. At some point, it would be cool to write something longer.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That was my next question. Yeah, I mean, because it's the idea is it's like topic aside, I would be curious if you would be interested or planning to expand upon, you know, any one topic or anything like memoir or something like that.
I would, I would. Memoirs are a funny thing because, like, I can't help but wonder where I would, like, at what point on the timeline would I say, like, okay, I've
Mm.
accomplished a thing, now I'm going to
Right.
write about
Yeah.
my whole life up to
N-
this point.
Yeah.
Like,
Now I'm worthy. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and it's
Mm-hmm.
for most, for most authors who have written a memoir that has been of some success, like they've done something fairly
Mm.
incredible, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's not to say that, that we don't do incredible things all the time, but is it incredible enough for me to say that's the thing? You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. I mean, it's I can understand. I mean, and that is a matter of opinion, for sure. We're always going to be our own harshest critic when it comes to have I accomplished enough. But there is, with a memoir in particular, the achievement puts the rest of the life in context, because it's to say, yes, but when I did that thing, when I made an ass of myself, or when I fell out of that building, it was going to lead me here. And that puts that context, changes that sequence or that story, because it's framed differently, right? So I can totally appreciate why you'd want to wait until you feel like there's enough context to draw from.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a tough one, um, because I'm not particularly. I mean, I don't know. I wrote this blog post about this recently, actually, about like there's like what level of um, success, or like, because like success and failure are two sides of the same coin, right? I have successfully released a number of albums, more albums than a lot of people that I know, more albums than a lot of people I know probably will in their lifetime. But to what level of critical acclaim,
Mm-hmm.
you know, by someone else's standard, like every one of those albums is a failure because they didn't
Mm.
sell
Mm.
a million copies, and no awards were won. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm. On the flip side of that, I always think of the one-hit wonder and what
Yeah,
that experience must be like, because they have achieved a objective level of success that anyone would say, "Oh, I would love if my song went to number one and I sold however many singles or whatever." Um, but if the other side of that is to say that you never had a hit again, um, you know, has been, never was,
yeah, yeah,
but context is everything, perspective is everything. But that is, that's something that only we can decide how we view our own achievements. Right.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Mm.
I mean, nobody can really decide what your trajectory for success is going to be anyway. All
Mm.
you can do is the next indicated thing. Like you can't live in the future, um, in that future where you sold a million records and won
Mm.
5 Grammys in one
Mm.
year. Like I
Mm.
don't get to live in that future. I have to live in this present moment now,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
is why I don't want to take the edge off of this moment. Right. This is why I
Yeah.
want to stay
Mm.
like totally with it, because
That's all
I'm
we have is the moment. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
I'm because I've determined that like it's highly unlikely that I'm going to do my best work um, hammered, you know. So yeah, so I have to do the next indicated thing today, right?
Yes.
And that next indicated thing is to, well, I mean, if like my whole life has led up to this moment, I'm like, I'm doing a podcast interview.
Mm. Right. This is what's going to change it. This is what's going to change everything. You're
Well,
going to
that's
look back on this will be the interview that changes it all.
well, that's the thing. I mean, like, it's entirely it's entirely likely that somebody that doesn't know me personally is going to see this and think, "Oh,
Mm.
this guy might maybe this guy has something to say. Maybe I'll check this out." Maybe that person has industry connection. I have no idea, right? It's just as likely that I could finally get around to writing a memoir about what it's like to be an independent musician in the Great White North,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes a a New York Times bestseller, and that's how people find the music that I've been making
Right.
for the last
Totally.
25 years. Like
Yeah.
I I don't get to decide how that
Yeah.
goes, right? I just
Yeah.
have to I just have to I just have to try new
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly the concept behind this podcast is to um, shed light on people who are putting in the work, who are facing the blank page every day. And if that means that someone reads your work or listens to your music,
Yeah.
that's a victory. Every single one of those, because that's kind of the point of this podcast in a lot of ways. Is like it's a discussion for sure, but it's also a chance to shed light on other writers.
Like the New York Times bestseller list is like it's a lofty goal,
Mm-hmm.
especially for somebody who's never written a book before, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'd
And
say yeah.
so let's not even worry about like I could still successfully write a book even if nobody read it. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm. And
and
that makes
be a
you a writer.
successful writer. Like you
Yeah.
are a
I mean
writer.
that's
Like
it's like yeah, it's like writer is as writer does. Do you write? Then you're a writer.
yeah,
Same. I say the same with
absolutely. Like
musicians or singers or anything like that, because uh, what does it mean to write? Does it mean to write to be published? Well, that no, you can't publish something if it's not written. So you have to write. So that's what makes you a writer.
yeah. And there's some amazing self-published books out there at this point.
Now more than ever, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's. I mean, it's all. It all comes down to perspective. I
Yeah.
mean, in the end.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. And and as you were saying before, you think like I got to keep going, got to keep hitting my reps, making sure you're doing that every day. So
Yeah.
what is next on the docket for Davey Johnston and the Confusionaires?
We are currently flushing out some more songs that I've kind of been amassing and condensing down what will eventually be the next album.
So is there a basic timeline involved in terms of what a release would be? Is that to summer 2025? Is that too ambitious?
That's probably a little bit ambitious.
Mm,
Um, we have a good number of shows in the early part of the year as well
mm,
that are
that would complicate things.
that yeah. So we're doing these things kind of simultaneously. So
I guess you have the freedom to take your time if you're doing it out of the rehearsal space, because you're not paying in studio fees or things like that.
yeah, so it's a blessing and a curse to be honest. Like
Mm.
nothing moves things along like a good deadline.
Oh yeah.
You know, if you give yourself 2 days to record a song, you'll get it done in 2 days. If you give yourself 2 weeks, you'll take all 14 of those days, right? So I like to try to rough things in a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
um, but once the songs are all kind of up to snuff, and once the sort of technical aspect of this is sort of uh, is settled upon
Sure.
and put into place, then
Mm-hmm.
it's a little easier to figure out what the timeline is going to be once things are more firmly in motion than they are right now. So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
that's a long way of saying I have no idea.
Well, that's fine. So in the meantime, where can people find you guys?
um, our website address, we've been having a bit of an issue with our website address lately. So if um, previously it has been just confusionaires.com. Um, the link that works the best now is confusionaires.band. While I try to figure out what's going on with the .com, but .band works. And from there, you can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. Trying to be a little more active with like YouTube Shorts and stuff like that. But
And you have a lot of music videos available for
yeah,
viewing on YouTube. I know we'll post a link
and
to your
then
channel.
and yeah, so and we have digital versions of everything on our Bandcamp site as well.
And so, where is your next show?
Our next show, we're playing in February, we play a few shows kind of throughout southern Alberta. We do Lacombe, Calgary, Lethbridge, and we do this ski resort in Pincher Creek. And then we got a couple shows in northern Alberta in March.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'm assuming all that stuff will be posted to the website, to the socials.
Yeah, we'll be beating people over the head with it as much as we possibly can.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Dave. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Mhm.
This is such a cool thing that you're doing, and I can't wait to see some of the other episodes.
Yeah, well, I've got a few lined up as it is now, so hope to have some of this stuff coming out in the new year.
Awesome. Oh, I should say one more. That if you are interested in at all in my blog, that it's at consciouspilgrim.com as well.
And that is also the same name for the YouTube channel that has those documentaries that I mentioned.
Yeah.
So I encourage everyone to go to that. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you the next time.